So we're back with part 3, and what we're going to look at is some error handling techniques. We're going to look at some common types of errors in PHP applications, and we have no error handling by default. So for example, one of the most common errors, probably the most common error, is a broken link, a page not found. So, I mistype the URL, and this is kind of on my local server. This is what XAMPP gives me. If I do this on AWS, again, I'm going to use the HTTPS version. If I go to a page that's not found, we get this kind of ugly Apache page. So one thing we should be doing is we should be checking for 404 errors and setting up a friendly error page that includes our site header and footer. So there's a few ways we can do this, and how we do it kind of depends on our web host. So what I'm going to do here, first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and create a 404 page. So in my project, I'm going to create a new file. I'll call it 404.php. I'm going to get rid of all of the HTML content. Page title. And require our header. And down below, we'll require our footer. Then our page content can go here. We'll just put on a message. You can put on any content you want here. We're not interacting with the database. We just want to replace this 404 page with this one. Something like this. Maybe I want to move this over. So actually what I could do, just open up our header. I could create a main section. I'll use the Bootstrap container class. I'll give some padding. I'll move my content inside. We want to do this on my index page as well. We'll have a look. Now, creating the 404 page doesn't automatically. What we're going to do is use that htaccess file we talked about that we could use for SSL configuration. We're going to create an htaccess file. And we will tell our application that if there is a 404 error, which page to load instead. I'm going to create a new file. Which I will call .htaccess. There's nothing before the dot. You can't create a file like this in your operating system. Your Mac Finder or your Windows Explorer is going to say the file doesn't have an extension. So you've got to create it within the code editor. So htaccess is the name. OS X will actually treat it like a hidden file. So what we want to set up here is an error document. If we get a 404 error, we want to redirect to our, we'll try it this way, our root folder. You may need to hardcode the path. We can make this dynamic. It should work both on our local host as well as on AWS. We're going to try it this way. So if we get a 404 error, we want to go here. Just going to double check my syntax. And we'll give this a try. So now if I refresh, the htaccess kicks in and the site still works, but if I break any of the links, we now get our 404 page. I'm actually going to want to upload this to the web server and make sure that it also works on AWS. Forgot to mention earlier, I actually connected to the VPN before class. Otherwise, obviously, my site wouldn't be working. So I'm going to connect. And open up the music library. I don't need to upload everything. So what I'll do is just see what files I've changed today. So I've got the htaccess 404, register and save pages. I'll say always use this action so I don't get the override prompt again. I also need to upload, excuse me, the IMG and JS folder that contains the changes we made in part 2 of the lesson. I'll upload those. Now I'll try my site again. We've got our changes here earlier. Refresh. But now if I go to some page that doesn't exist, extension. Okay, so that's interesting. htaccess worked locally, may not be configured on AWS. I'm going to try the full path, see if that makes a difference. I'm going to upload htaccess again. Whoops, so it does work. So I did need my fully qualified path. I just have to change that. Lowercase, because our Apache server is case sensitive. Oops. I'll try one more time. This should fix the problem. I'll break the URL. And now we get our 404 error page. So by using the htaccess file and our error document, even though it's going to take me to the live site, that way 404 errors are handled. Now, some web hosts make it even easier. So for example, here, because this is using a Windows server, this host actually lets us set up custom error pages. So for any URL, we can simply set up a path right here. So I don't need to use htaccess. I can just create those error pages, link to them directly. So there's one error handling technique. There are a couple others that we should implement. The first one is actually in our database file. So one of the challenges is when we're using PDO, by default, if we have PDO, if we have database errors, those errors don't actually get displayed to us during development. So for example, I'm going to open up my artists page, my artist list page. So let's say here I have an error in my SQL query. My table is actually called artists, plural, but maybe I misspell it. Let's see what happens. So when I go here, there's an error, but we're not actually seeing the error. My table isn't getting populated because I've misspelled the table name, but that error is actually suppressed. Now, when our app is in production, it's okay, but for development, it's going to be confusing to me because my page hasn't worked, but there's no indication as to why. So we should be, at least during development, enabling PDO errors. So what we're going to do is turn on with the set attribute function for our database object. We want to set the error mode to error mode exception. In this case, PDO is actually going to show us what's wrong. Now, you may want to comment this out when your app is in production, but for development, it's very useful to have this on. So now if I refresh, now we actually get the error. And what's the error? That the table or view, my username.artist, doesn't exist. So our default behavior with PDO, again, is not to see these errors. So the easiest thing is in our database, and when we're developing, let's turn on this error handling. Now, the other thing we should do, I'm going to leave this error in here for a minute, is we don't really want at runtime, rather than showing these errors, what should happen is we should be using try-catch blocks. So if an error occurs, typically we should load a page that's similar to the 404 page. It just says an error has occurred. And then we also have a few potential mechanisms we could use to notify ourselves of the error. So we're going to go ahead and make a generic error page as well. So I'm going to make a new PHP file called error. I'm actually just going to copy everything out of, actually, it's okay. No, never mind. We'll build it ourselves. So we'll require our error and set our title. We'll create our main section. We'll use the container, some padding. You can put in anything you want as content. We'll add the footer here. So what we want is to add a try-catch block to any page, anytime we're interacting with the database, so that if something goes wrong, we can display this friendly error page instead. So the page looks like this on my local server. So in my artist list, what we actually should be doing is wrapping all of this code where we try to connect to the database and do this. I want to wrap all of this in a try-catch block. So and PHP would be similar to Java. So I'm going to open my try above the database connection. I'm going to cut that closing curly bracket all the way down here. So everything, all of this code happens inside of my try. And for your assignment, whenever you're doing database operations and code working with the data, it should be in a try-catch block in case that database operation fails. I'm going to catch exception. I'll just call that exception E. And then we'd have a few options. One option that I like, I mean, we could log it into a log file. The other thing I'd like to do is send myself an email using the PHP mail function. Now, there's limited functionality with this on the AWS web server. I'm going to show you what it looks like, but the server's only configured to send out a few emails a day. So I'm going to show you this, but I don't recommend you enable it for now in your code. So put in, put in a subject. Message body would be the exception itself. And normally I could send from computer said yes. So that would send an email. And this is useful because then you know right away what's happened on your site. You get an email in your inbox and it's telling you there's an error and you can see the error message. Again, the mail functionality on AWS server is extremely limited. So I'm not going to enable this code, but I'm just showing you what it would look like. In your assignments, you do not need to email the error messages to yourself. But what we do want to do in this case, remove that, is at the very least, we are going to redirect the user our error.php page. We don't generally want to show the users the error. We just don't want them to see the error messages. And exit. We have the option to include a finally block if there's additional cleanup code you want, and then we could exit from there instead. I'll just use my try catch here, again from before the database, right up to and including the closing of the connection. So if I save this and go back, and now I try my artist list again. Again, I should have an error in artist list because my table name in my query is still wrong. So this should be generating an error. So now if I try to go to the artist list, I'm going to get taken to the error page. So any of the code we've written in an application, so for example, in our artist file, anything or save registration here. So any place we're going to connect to the database, run a query, we probably want to, I'll put it in here as well. That and indent. I'm going to catch an exception. We're going to redirect to the error page and exit. So I should have this on my artist form, save artist, I validate, and my delete. So I will add this code into all of those places, wrapping all of the database interactions in try-catch blocks and adding this error handler. So those are our basic techniques. Try-catch, 404 handling with htaccess, friendly error page, friendly 404 page, and enabling PHP error attributes. I'm going to fix my code. I will push this all up to GitHub shortly, but before I do, I'm going to put try-catch blocks in all of our pages. I would encourage you to do so, and you will definitely need to be doing that for part 3 of assignment 2. So that's it for today. Make sure you get started on assignment 2, sorry, part 1. It is due next Thursday. If you have questions, then feel free to post them on the D2L forum, and I will be available by email. Also, if office hours have to be moved, I'm happy to conduct office hours virtually next week. You can still book an appointment, and we can conduct those through Google Hangouts. Have a great weekend, everybody.